Hi everyone, Eric Gros-Dubois, EPGD Attorneys at Law. So we're going to do a video talking about corporate compliance and more specifically how it applies to LLCs. So it's springtime 2026 and the theme that we have at the firm is talking to our clients, reminding our clients that there are things you need to do every year with your companies. When we talk about the difference between LLCs and corporations, one of the main differences is what we call the corporate formalities. Now, just a side note, we use the word corporate a lot of times, even when we're talking about an LLC. Now, to be very precise, corporations and LLCs are two different types of entities. They're created by statute and they're separate statutes. So down here in Florida, we've got the Florida LLC statute and the Florida Corporation statute. Now, just to refresh everyone's memory, the LLC is an evolution that was born out of an idea that was created with the corporation. And what is that idea? The idea is limited liability. So the corporation invented the idea of limited liability. That means that somebody can put their money into a company, into a venture that can go out and try to be profitable. But if, heaven forbid, they're not profitable and there's losses, you're limited to the investment you made in the company and they're not going to go after your other assets, your personal assets. So if my friend Karen and I just went and started our own company, but we didn't create an entity, we just did it as an old school partnership, Eric and Karen just going out there doing business. If we had losses, then our personal assets would be at stake to satisfy those losses. So they invented the corporation. Later on, they invented the LLC. The LLC, they put it right in the name, limited liability company. Now, they're very similar. They have this limited liability, but they're also different. And one of the main differences is what we call the corporate formalities. So LLCs are the new, hip, cool, much more informal, right? Like if you look at my office, half the people are in tennis shoes, where it wasn't like 2 generations ago where everybody would have been in suits and fancy shoes and ties and everything. The corporation is your old, stuffy type of company that your grandparents set up. So what are some of the things? You must have a board of directors. You must have annual meetings of the shareholders. You must have an annual meeting of the board of directors. They must elect officers. The officers then run the company. All of this must be recorded in annual minutes. The minutes must be in writing and then held in a corporate minute book that is physical. In addition, you had share certificates that are physical. In addition, you had a ownership ledger, and all of this had to be maintained every single year. And the real downside was that let's say that someone was suing a corporation and then they found out that the company had not been following the corporate formalities and they hadn't been keeping up with the annual meetings and they hadn't been doing annual minutes. Maybe they lost their minute book or maybe they never even had one. All of those points could then be taken to a judge to say, hey, judge, they're not following the corporate formalities. You should allow me to pierce the corporate veil. And I'm sure I've done a ton of videos about this exact topic. Piercing the corporate veil is a very complex, and there's a lot of other ways to pierce the veil, but this is one of the ways. So the LLC, everything I just said is optional. So you should have a board of directors or some sort of board of managers, but you don't have to. You should have annual meetings, but you don't have to. You should have written minutes kept in a minute book and do it annually, but you don't have to. An ownership ledger, membership interest certificates. These are all good ideas, and I counsel all of my clients to actually follow through this process. So what's important to remember? The LLC, a lot of these are optional, but they will still protect your company. So let's say that somebody's trying to make this argument to the judge. Hey, judge, they've never had a meeting. They don't keep regular minutes. They don't have a physical book. They don't have share certificates. Again, the LLC, all of those things are optional, but what if the LLC then turns around and says, well, Your Honor, actually, look, we did. Now, here's what's really important. There are things that you must do every year, even as an LLC. You must renew your filing with the state, whichever state you incorporated in or organized in. And so there's usually a fee, there's an annual report. You should update your ownership structure. So if the ownership has changed, it's a great idea to just put it in writing. You should have the corporate book. You must file an annual tax return, right? If I find out that a company hasn't been filing its tax returns, I use that. I say, hey, judge, even though they're an LLC and even though they have all this flexibility and they're not as rigid as the corporation, they haven't been doing their annual reports. They haven't updated their ownership. They have out-of-date records with the IRS. They don't have tax returns. These are all things that I can show the judge that they are not doing things the right way. And these are simple things that we just have a reminder every year to all of our clients. So if you own a company, whether it's a part owner or a majority owner or a sole owner, and you are curious, you're like, I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. It is a 20-minute conversation. I can even send you something to look at. And maybe you start by watching a video like this and then just reach out to my office and let's have a call, let's have a couple emails, because a lot of this is just good housekeeping, right? And so you make sure that, for example, if you change addresses, the address stays up to date. This is done on the annual report. Maybe you've changed registered agents. And in fact, I've seen a terrible situation where a client stopped paying the registered agent, which is usually if you use a third party and it's not yourself, you have to pay a fee for that. Well, they stopped paying, so the registered agent stopped doing their job and they got sued. The registered agent got served. The registered agent never bothered to tell them because they weren't obligated to anymore because they weren't being paid as the registered agent. And the client ended up with a default judgment against them. So now the client has to go to the judge and say, hey, judge, I need you to set aside this default judgment. Oh, and by the way, the reason there's a default is because we haven't done our annual reports. We haven't done our annual ownership update. We haven't updated our registered agent. We haven't updated our primary address. All things that are just easy to do and should be done every year. And so just like good housekeeping, we were just talking about how it's Chinese New Year coming up and it's a good excuse to clean out your closet. This is just one of the good habits you should get in as a business owner. If you guys have any questions, leave a comment below or reach out to me directly. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. And of course, you can contact my website directly. Thanks, everyone.